Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. So this is going to be the pilot video kind of for my new channel, Michaela in Finland. So I should say I am Michaela Peters because that's more so how they pronounce my name here in Finland. And I am going to cover a bunch of different topics related to what being an immigrant in Finland is like. But I had a very loyal following of Finns on my original account, which is Migratory Michaela, and now this is, like I said, going to be Michaela in Finland. But to make this all the more interesting, I'm going to start by dropping a bomb on this channel, because what do I mean by that? Let's think about where to start and keep this streamlined. So I originally came to Finland in 2021 as a master's student on a Fulbright scholarship. Now I'm currently a PhD student, and I use air quotes because I'm doing a terrible job as far as I'm concerned. I've been a YouTuber for about a year now. I was successfully able to grow my Migratory Michaela account to 10K until it started stagnating, at which point I decided that I needed to separate my channel. So this will be targeted towards a Finnish audience, Finns who want to know about what an American thinks of Finland. It will also be targeted towards international people, hopefully coming to Finland, who want advice about what it's like, what my experience has been like here, and at some point I might want to try to start using this as a platform to practice me speaking and learning Finnish in an interactive way where people can correct all my mistakes, but it might start out very boring because my Finnish is very incredibly rudimentary at this point, especially because I have not studied it now for about 2 years, and I only studied it for a year and a half, which is really not enough time to give you even a somewhat good base. But anyway, what I'm going to talk about today in this video is, like, at the date that I'm making this video, which is June 30th, which is funny because that's around what time I started becoming a YouTuber last year. I think it was June 20th. I'm going to talk about my doctor's appointment today in Finland and, what is the real reason I came back to Finland. I think that's what this video is really going to be about. And like I said, this is totally dropping a bomb. So pretty soon my life is going to change, which I have no idea how that's going to change my internet presence because, I'm going to take on some more responsibilities, and basically pretty soon I'm going to become a parent. And I felt really uncomfortable sharing this on the internet because, it's not really like the most ideal situation under which to become a parent, but it is the situation anyway. And instead of getting into addressing a lot of what I mean by that, I'm going to talk more about my decision to come to Finland to give birth, and how it was really one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make in my life. And really, I'm going to highly praise the Finnish medical system in this video for why I felt so strongly about giving birth in Finland, and why that was really sort of a dream that I had, maybe, and why I ultimately decided to do that, because I really, quite frankly, did have the option to give birth in the US or to give birth in Finland, and ultimately it was a very hard decision, but to give birth in Finland. And so I basically flew back to Finland at the latest point at which I could possibly fly in order to do that. Yes, I clearly do not look pregnant because I'm sitting down, but it is what it is. So instead, I'm going to show you here, this thingy, which is this cute little card that they give you when you're having a baby in Finland. It says happy. And so they basically write down your upcoming appointments in here, and you get this little mom card, I guess, and they write down different information such as I guess your measurements and stuff like that. Yeah, pretty much that's what that is. But yeah, it was interesting because I had to go to a couple different nebulas, which is really interesting because we don't really have this concept of a nebula in the US. Instead, the way that it works is you have an OB/GYN, which stands for obstetrician and gynecologist, which that's the OB part is the obstetrician, the GYN is the gynecologist, and the doctor for the baby is called a pediatrician, and those are separate things. Whereas here, nebula is the obstetrician, essentially, part of the OB/GYN, and then the part for the babies, and it kind of all goes together. So that's very interesting. But I've basically received half of my medical care during the time I've been pregnant in Finland, and then the other half was in the US, so not with this card. I actually got my medical documents released, which are something 67 pages long. I brought them to the nebula today, and they're like, I don't think we really need this. And I was like, that's fine. But anyway, so The medical records cost me $12 to release them, and when I told my grandmother this, she's like, that's actually cheap. Some places charge a lot more. And yeah, so that was the whole thing. But anyway, I did things like somewhere in the middle of your pregnancy, you do a glucose test. That's a pretty important part of your routine exams for being pregnant, I guess. And I was very fortunate that mine was good because I feel like I've been eating way too much sugar this whole time. Apparently that you crave sugar to account for this calorie deficit that you start to have because, you're feeding to not just yourself, but somebody else. Okay. But yeah, so really the decision came down to, aside from cost being a very obvious factor, a lot of things just lining up very clearly, me really taking a leap of faith and making a decision that was just for myself and not for another person for once in my life, which was really like kind of a big deal for me. So in some ways I really felt like that was selfish, but like I tried to look at it more as self-preservation, and I'll be honest, it's still something that I'm struggling with. But the biggest reason why I made this decision was because of the whole like C-section rate being higher in the US. So like, let's talk about that. And, I'm going to try to make this as interesting to a non-interested in, this topic audience and like stick to this from a medical perspective, because really one of the big issues is that in the US, the healthcare system is so capitalized, it is like really based on profit, for profit. Yeah, that a lot of times doctors will get impatient and they will put a lot of pressure on people to get C-sections when it's really not completely necessary. So what is a C-section, cesarean section? It's, when they cut the baby out of you instead of you giving birth like naturally. And a lot of times that will happen in the US because the birth is not progressing as quickly as they would like it to. And also it is a lot more expensive of a bill. So obviously they make more money off of it. And even though they've been trying to change that and acknowledge that it comes with its own risks and complications to try to force this procedure onto women, it is still something that is a problem. In fact, the national C-section rate in the US, I think, is somewhere around 25%, whereas in Finland, it's 18%. But something else I'd like to keep in mind is in Finland, people tend to have kids a little bit older, whereas, in the US, that is probably less so a thing. And so I would honestly expect that the rate in Finland, if people were having kids younger on average, would probably be even lower. And yeah, so the whole time I've been pregnant, not the whole time, but I've been reading this book, and I've been reading other books like this that are just talking about birth and stuff and like how much you really have to advocate for yourself. It's really cool that in Finland, they actually automatically give you a midwife. You can hire a doula if you want. That you can also do that in the US. But hiring a midwife and or doula in the US is like an additional service, whereas here the midwife is included. And the reason why that's really cool is because the midwife is there to advocate for you and to, make sure that like your needs and wishes are being respected. So in the US, like, because these are additional services and cost additional money, this is not something that people typically do. So it's also interesting because another thing that I started doing when I was in the US is I started approaching random women who I knew had kids and asked them how much out of pocket after insurance they paid to give birth in the US. And on the low end, it was $2,000. On the high end, it was like $6,000 to $8,000. And again, it depended on like whether it was natural, whether there was a C-section, all of that. C-sections, tended to be thousands of dollars higher. So this was something that really started scaring me. And when I started reading books like this, it was talking a lot about like how much you need to be able to advocate for yourself. I personally already had, at least one medical experience where I felt like I was not able to advocate for myself. And, to be clear, I'm not like anti-vaccines, but like there was an instance where I felt very pressured by a doctor to take a vaccine that I didn't really feel like I needed to take, just because of the fact that, she was like sort of fear-mongering me into taking this vaccine. And this is the thing that books like this are going to talk about, is like, you as the patient, you're still in a subordinate position. So having a doctor come and talk to you and try to like get you to like do what they want because they're in the position of power, like that's very common. Whereas we already know that in Finland, there tends to exist a lot smaller of a power distance. So the idea of, a doctor coming in and trying to tell you like what to do, like, that's going to happen a lot less in Finland. I think they're a lot more respecting of people's choices and autonomy here. For instance, I thought it was really interesting. I finally met with the doctor today in Finland because usually I'm meeting with the nurses, and it just had her first name there. It wasn't like Dr. whatever. And so in the US, it is always Dr. whoever. But yeah, anyway, in this particular instance where she was trying to make me get a vaccine, it had something to do with like sexually transmitted diseases. And, I was like, well, what if I'm abstinent? And then she's like, well, if one day you get married and your husband cheats on you and you don't know about it, and then he brings an STD back to you, this is the reason why you need this vaccine. And I just remember thinking, if my husband is cheating on me, I'm going to be having a lot bigger problems than whether I'm getting an STD or not. Well, could be. But anyway, I just did not appreciate that. And I use that example to just like illustrate the fact that, it is really hard to sort of be able to advocate for yourself in a US medical system, because I feel like a lot of times they're trying to push things on you and using their power as a doctor to be able to tell you basically like, you don't know better than me and you should do this thing even if you don't want it. Whereas in Finland, I feel like they're a lot more respecting of your wishes. So when I was talking to the doctor today in Finland and explaining like, my biggest reason really for coming back to Finland to give birth, amongst a ton of other things, but one of the biggest ones, not just cost. I did say, part of it was cost. And, I'm very fortunate that like I had a Kela card come in the mail recently because I applied for one and I was actually able to get it, which, does not always happen. So that was really awesome. I also got my baby box, which I'm going to do another video of me opening the baby box, and I've been waiting really long. It's like literally right here in the corner of the screen. There are some other bedding baby things. Yeah, so I've been like hardcore nesting and cleaning the whole apartment because I'm getting ready for the baby, because this is like, what starts happening to you. It's very crazy how much energy you have for cleaning, because I already normally do, but it seems to be way more than normal. But anyway, I ended up telling this doctor, like, all this stuff I just mentioned about C-sections. And she's like, wow, that's really sad that, they're trying to push them onto you, not because it's really, like, necessary, but, because it's more money and because they get impatient with waiting. And, I already know my experience with being very sick in Finland. For instance, I had contracted bronchitis very badly in... like, it was literally like April 2022. Okay. And I was like dying. I don't think I've ever been this sick. I rather have COVID. Like, this is how bad this was. It was like, I was just like coughing up a ton of mucus, like every day, like trying to take a shower to get it all out in the morning. And I kept calling to the doctors every day, like, I feel terrible. And they're like, just deal with it. Like, they would not give me antibiotics. They would not give me medicine. They would not see me. Like, they're just like, just let your body deal with it. And, talking to Russian people, like, they're like, we wouldn't do that in Russia. They want everybody to go back to work. They would just give you antibiotics so you can like go back to work sooner. And honestly, the same thing in the US. But in Finland, they're really not like that. They're very like a lot more natural and what's the word, like homeopathic almost, if you will. Well, I'm not sure if that's exactly the best way of putting it, but in their approach towards medicine and like letting somebody's like natural organism, as you will, it's probably more so how they refer to it in Russian, but like work through this process, because that's it, because the economy does not rely on people, being very like, they're not trying to like force you to get back out there to keep working. Like, they're like, you're sick. We're not gonna like, it's not like in the US where if I get sick, I have to use my PTO days, right? I only get a set number of PTO days. It's not like I get like a separate, well, when I worked at NASA, I did have like a separate sick leave balance. So it's kind of different, but no, a corporate job, it's like, you get like 25 PTO days, and if you get sick for 2 weeks, tough crap. Like, you're going to burn through 10 of your PTO days just to, get over your sickness. So it's really unfortunate, because obviously being sick is not fun and it's not something people choose, but that I think creates a lot of stress and unhappiness as well. Yeah, so, it was just, a lot of it was just me wanting my medical wishes to be respected in a way that I was very concerned and apprehensive that they wouldn't be if I had stayed in the US. The other thing was I just really strongly preferred and enjoyed my interactions with the specialists here in Finland as opposed to the US. In the US, it really feels like, well, first off, it is really hard to figure out how much things are going to cost ahead of time. And now I'm going to get into a cost breakdown. Okay, so with going to the Nevola, how many times I've gone now, I don't even know, probably more than 5 or 6. I have paid a clinic fee of 66 euros. That is the only bill that has come to me in the mail. And I'm pretty sure healthcare is free for kids here, if I'm not mistaken. So you have all that. Whereas in the US, for instance, it was, asked me whether I wanted to do genetic testing or not. To be very honest with you, this is interesting, but like my brother has a rare genetic disorder and so does my cousin. And I'm the only one out of the three grandkids who came from the same lineage of this one grandfather who does not have a genetic disorder. So I was like, maybe genetic testing would be good. And so even though this seems like a verifiable reason for which I would maybe need genetic testing, my brother's an albino, which is a little bit less serious, even though it does cause legal blindness. My other cousin has a much more serious genetic disorder. So they did actually test for that one that my cousin has and ruled it out. Like, it's not there. I assume if I have a brother who's an albino, I am probably a carrier for albinism. So the thing was, I called my blood work company to be like, hi, they want to do genetic testing. Is it going to be included and covered by insurance? And then they said yes. And then I ended up getting a bill for like $700 for like one genetic test and then $500 for another genetic test. And I called to insurance and I called to, I think it was LabCorp or whoever it was, whatever blood company, what do we call these, like blood testing companies basically, and they're like, yeah, that's correct. And I'm like, but you guys like told me it was going to be covered, like why do I have like this high bill for it? Oh, well, insurance covered part of it. So then the other thing is you have all these different kinds of accounts. You can get better or worse health insurance in the US. So you can get one that is a high deductible plan, and then you have an FSA, which is hold on a second, wait, HSA and FSA, health savings account. Yes. So like my health insurance that I had last year was a $3,000 deductible. And then my HSA account, I can use it each year. Then when you have a lower deductible plan, and why it's good to hit your deductible, because then things start getting cheaper, but they don't start getting free. This is the other thing. They're never going to be free. They're just going to be cheaper. So it's the same thing that just because a woman gave birth in the US, she's still responsible for $2,000. The other thing that I'm going to mention, because I just know that a lot of people do not actually know this, just because you give birth in Finland does not mean your kid is a Finnish citizen. Your kid is going to be whatever citizenship the parents are. So no, my child is not going to be Finnish. My child is going to be American and could be a different nationality, but I'm probably not going to utilize that because it's probably not helpful. So yes, I'm going to have an American child. Whereas the benefit of giving birth in the US, if you're not American yourself, is that they have the birthright by giving birth there. You're just quite literally buying and paying for it because it's probably very expensive to give birth there, especially if you're not very firmly established in the US yourself. I mean, maybe you're a green card holder or something, and then your kid's a citizen. Okay, that's cool, I guess. Okay, so yeah, I'm surprised a lot of people don't know that, and that's not just Finland. That's how most of Europe works. They do not have this birthright citizenship thing. And I thought just Americans didn't know that, but it turns out that pretty much anybody, even Finnish people, do not know that. So I'm here to tell you that today. All right, so all of those things. So anyway, the other deductible plan I had, it was a $1,500 deductible, and then it has an FSA, flexible savings account. And the thing is, you need to spend all this money by the end of the year. It will not roll over. So I basically have two accounts right now that sit with money in them that can only be used on healthcare. So I had to spend, $1,200 out of my FSA account on the stupid genetic testing that they lied to me about and said it would be included when it wasn't, or it was going to be covered in some way and it wasn't. And then you also get all the doctor's appointments. Then you talk to a doctor for 30 minutes and that's $300 after it goes through insurance. So I had to pay all these other bills. So by the end of it, I'm sitting here and I'm between these two accounts, I have maybe barely $2,000, which I'm also going to need for doctor's appointments later in the year. So if I have $2,000 that my birth is going to at least cost me, if not more, where is this money coming from? And then people are well, you can just not pay your medical bills and you can just send them to collections and it doesn't affect your credit score, and which I'm not even completely sure if that's true or not, because I've gotten two different opinions from the internet on that. So whatever. I don't even know if that's true. But that, or you can just pay a very small amount on them and just keep doing that and kind of let them sit there. And I just morally and ethically did not really want to have to do that. I was no thanks. Whereas here, the most expensive birth I've heard of was a more complicated C-section type of thing maybe for 400 euros, but on average it's going to cost you 39 euros. Also, they're going to let you stay in the hospital between 2 and 4 days. In the US, I'm pretty sure they get you out after like a day. So, there's all these things. Also, like, I kind of was interested in water birth. I think that's a little bit more common in Finland. So, like, the hospital that I would be delivering out of, like, actually does offer that. So that's great. I already asked about that. Cool, exciting. But, like I said, like, the biggest thing for me was just wanting to, like, I want to try, and I'm not saying this is going to be successful, to do a more natural birth. And I just kind of really understood that, based on my experiences, like, between these two countries, that I was going to have a better shot at doing that in Finland. Now, in terms of, again, not just like, this annoying healthcare stuff that I just explained with the US and with Finland, like, the US is obviously way more a wild animal in that sense. I really just enjoyed my experiences with the healthcare staff in Finland a lot better. I'm not saying the ones in the US were bad. It's just you really feel like you're a dollar sign and not a person a lot of times, because it's very like in and out, like they don't really care, and it's just like everything's very fast, and maybe part of that is a byproduct of living in New Jersey. But one of the things I really liked about, in Finland is they really want to make sure you're okay. They really want to make sure there are no issues. Even as an example, there are certain things that I've learned about, my pregnancy being here that I would not have learned in the US. Like something like you're supposed to get a Tdap vaccine, tetanus, and it's also for whooping cough, around 35 weeks of being pregnant. I did not know that. They did not tell me that in the US. The other thing is, if you've spent significant time abroad in a country that is still has tuberculosis, you should go get an x-ray to make sure that you do not have tuberculosis inside of you, essentially. And then also, like, if there is a risk around that, then it would be wise to vaccinate the baby against tuberculosis, which is not something that's generally practiced in Western countries. Definitely not in the US. Maybe they think they're too far away from that. I don't know why, because a lot of people come to the US from everywhere. But in Finland, it's more pertinent with it being next to Russia, and that mainly being a big place where they're concerned about it coming from. So those were other things I learned. They also are very, like, concerned about your mental health because it's Finland. And so they're like, this all sounds really hard. Like, do you want to talk to somebody about this? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess maybe I should. Yeah, so there's that. So they're like, wanting to make sure you go to this like family psychologist and stuff like that, which is very nice. And then they're even like, if you're having any issues and you need help, like once a week or however many times, or if you need financial help or like some financial education resources kind of thing, you can reach out to the Nevola at any point after you've given birth. And I'm like, this will never happen in the US. Like, so it's like really the amount of support that is available for, going through this kind of experience in Finland is like amazing compared to the US. Like in the US, it's so like everybody fend for themselves, and here they like really want to support you. And it's like, it's so beautiful. And I remember like when I first went to the doctors here, or it was like the nurse, she's like, so how was your childhood? And I was like, why are we talking about this? And like, to be honest, I like almost started crying during this. There are a lot of times when you're pregnant where you're just like trying to keep it together because everything makes you cry. And this was really one of them. And she's sitting there asking me like, what was your childhood like? What kind of parent do you think you're going to be? And why was this hard? Because I think I realized I really didn't like my childhood. And that was really painful. And I just didn't want to think about it. Even though I probably should. But yeah, I was like, well, I just want my kid to like, everybody wants their kid to be happy. It's not that. I really want my kid to be like, not even independent, but just like, be able to advocate for themselves and like do what they want and have opinions and share those things. And I don't want my kid to like do things to please other people. I feel like that's something I've struggled with. That's something I don't, particularly like. And, that's what's important to me. And she was like, okay, like that's good. And yeah, so anyway, but I think that's crazy that like in a Nevola appointment, you're going to talk about like these kinds of mental health related topics. Like to me, that was just like mind boggling, but like, it was really nice because you really feel like they like care about you, and they're just like so empathetic, and I don't know, it's just like they're so sweet and nice, and it's just like I would literally feel happier after I went to the doctors, whereas in the US I would just feel like annoyed a lot of times because they're usually making you sit in the waiting room for a really long time, and then they bring you in and they talk to you for 5 seconds and then they're like, okay, bye. Like, so yeah, I mean, that was the whole thing was, I did ask if I could fly at the end, in the US, and they're like, well, you can, but we wouldn't recommend it. And then when I went for my ultrasound, the other doctor's like, you've had a perfect pregnancy. And I was like, I don't know how, man. I have not been doing anything special, and I've been eating way too much sugar, if I'm being super honest with you. And then I went to my chiropractor, and he's like, this was really what did it for me. Like, this was the moment when I was like, yeah, I gotta leave. He's like, wow, yeah, it's a lot cheaper there. He's like, sounds cool. If I were you, I would probably do that. And I was like, thanks for your blessing, chiropractor. It's probably the only doctor I have in the US I actually like, if I'm being honest with you. Like, who I actually am like, this is a good dude. Like, he doesn't just want the money. He actually really cares about helping his patients. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at now. I am getting pretty close to, this could happen pretty soon. So again, I have to figure out like what that's going to mean for my channel. Maybe I'll talk about that process of like, when the baby's born, like what does that look like with all the legal stuff and like, in what timeline that needs to get done. I have to apply for the baby's US passport soon. And yeah, so there's all those things. But, I'm very just like, appreciative of this opportunity that everything kind of like fell into place with, me getting the Kela card, me getting the baby box. Usually I sublet my apartment for the summer. For some reason, nobody wanted it. So I came back to it. And, this is going to be like, I'm going to be here for a few months until I bring the baby back to the US to like show off to the American family because, obviously that's important. And because the baby doesn't have family in Finland. So I'm not Finnish and I do not have Finnish relatives. I just ended up here. But yeah, so it's, I really feel like this is such a, blessing. That's not exactly the word I want to use. I mean, yes, that, but like privilege and opportunity, like a really great thing that's happening to me to be able to have this experience in Finland, probably one of the greatest countries in the world really for like having a kid. I remember one American friend I had who moved here, he's like, parenting in Finland is like parenting on easy mode. And I'm like, cool. So, this is the same way I feel about this, like giving birth in Finland and just like this whole process is like on easy mode. So I'm really excited about this and it's going to obviously change my life forever and it's going to make doing YouTube a lot harder. But I hope that I can bring a more interesting perspective to the audience because, I joke for a while, my Migratory Michaela account was mostly 40-year-old men, 40 to 50-year-old men. Probably some of these people have kids. So maybe at this point, this will be more relatable. Yeah. So, I can obviously like recount also like how that went. And what that's going to look like moving forward. But anyway, I also am happy to talk more about, different topics of immigration and, I think I'm a poor example because I honestly do frequent the U.S. quite a bit, for lots of different reasons. Mainly, probably related to the fact that my family is there and it's hard to find a job in Finland, which are other topics that I'll probably discuss on this channel at some point. Such as, my opinions with like how to find a job, what has worked for me, what information I get from talking to a lot of different people because I talk to a ton of different international people. And so that's really ultimately like the direction I hope this channel is going to be going in. So it's like, yes, being a mom will soon be part of my identity, but to me, it's not like the only part of my identity that's important. I think that's important not to lose that when you become a parent, because kids are still their own people, even if they're babies. So that's good to keep in mind. And I'm still myself, even with a kid. So yeah, it just changes things a little bit. Anyway, that's everything that I have for today. And, welcome to this new side of my channel. I hope this intro video was interesting. And at the very least, it's probably going to really set the tone for like who's going to continue supporting me because, like I said, I just totally dropped a bomb there. Nobody saw this coming. Well, I hate to say neither did I, but obviously I've been living with this for months now, so that's not exactly true. All right, well, that's everything I have, and it's time for me to go do other things now. And so thank you for your new interest in this side of my channel, and until my next video, bye.